as it's 7 o'clock, we'll make a start. I'd like to welcome Councillor Johnson, Leader of the Council and Cabinet, and the Member for Community Services, and the second person's not here. Fire alarm procedures. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices down the main staircase opposite the lifts in the foyer. Assemble in Hawley Square on the Green. Officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. With everyone present, please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and they are not used to make or receive phone calls in the chamber during this meeting. Does anybody intend to film the meeting? Any member of the public who objects to the possibility of being filmed may wish to take this opportunity to leave the meeting. I would advise that if filming takes place, anyone in attendance in the public areas may have their image captured. I urge anyone filming proceedings to avoid filming members of the public, particularly if there are children present. Speaking under 24.1, are there any members wishing to speak under 24.1? Right, apologies for absence. Apologies were received from the following members. Councillor Gibson, Councillor Horness, who's substituted by Councillor Marsden, Councillor Ian Gregory, who's substituted by Councillor Bayford, Councillor Driver, substituted by Councillor King. Are there any further apologies? Are there any declarations of interest? I will at this point... Sorry, mine might take longer, so would you like to...
Thank you. I asked this question at the last two previous meetings of Council and Cabinet of Mr Boyle. I think it's important that I do the same again. I attended a public meeting at the Winter Gardens for the Save Manston at the very beginning in April. A collection was made where I donated £20. We were trying to support the payment for the hall on the day. That's that bit. Then there was the AGM for Save Manston at Newington Community Centre, where a bucket went round again and we made a donation. Obviously, as someone who is not only the leader of the council but is known to be a supporter of the airport, I have taken advice on a number of occasions with the previous monitoring officer as well, but I feel it's necessary to make this because it is a subject of a standards complaint against me that I gave donations to that two meetings that I attended. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Given the unprecedented level of press coverage that my declaration of potential interest received last month, I wanted to restate publicly that there is nothing in the Constitution to prohibit me from chairing this meeting or engaging fully in the debate under Agenda Item 5. I am not party to any privileged information with regard to River Oak, save the folder that all councillors have been provided with, and have no financial interest, and I've had little contact with my cousin Toby Freudman in recent years. On a personal note, I would like to thank the many members of the public for your kind words of support when I was singled out for unfair treatment in the local press recently. I very much appreciated it. Thank you. There has been some discussion on social media about the publicly stated views of various members of this panel, suggesting that their position on the call-in is predetermined and therefore compromised. I should remind the press and public that this committee has no executive powers, so we cannot change the Cabinet decision on Manston. Overview and Scrutiny has the power to make recommendations to Cabinet to reconsider its decision based on the information we received tonight. However, the actual decision on the future of Manston Airport and the CPO has already been made by Cabinet. Given the call-in was cross-party and by 5 councillors, I hope there will be a thorough and robust examination tonight. The meeting is being held in open session and is being recorded, I hope. Yes, and is being recorded so that the discussion, as well as any vote taken, will be a matter of public record. Thank you. So the next agenda item, so were there any other declarations? No. The next agenda item is the minutes of previous meetings. I did just want to point out, although it's possibly an accurate record of what Councillor Harrison said, that on page 2 of the agenda item 3, the minutes of the meeting of the 21st of October, it says Councillor Harrison, Cabinet Member for Operational Services, said that the Vattenfall Community Project Fund had not been utilised since 2009. That's actually factually inaccurate because members will know, I'm sure, that the fund was £100,000 and it's now only £92,000. So £8,000 was actually spent between 2009 and whenever Cabinet decided to reallocate the rest on a plan that was involved technical drawings. So although it's inaccurate, I think it's an accurate account of what was said. So can I have somebody to propose accepting the minutes? Councillor Campbell, seconded. Councillor Dwyer. Dwyer. Right, so the minutes of the extraordinary meeting. Can I have somebody to propose? Councillor Campbell, and seconded by Councillor Bayford. Right, so we move on to agenda item 5, the calling of the Cabinet decision of the 11th of December, Manston Airport. As members will be aware, thank you. I know you are. Councillor Saunders.
Members use their...
Yes, thank you. Members.
Will you use your
So, agenda item 5. The call-in, as you know, was by 5 members of the overall scrutiny panel. The call-in reason was given by 4 members as the report before Cabinet did not contain sufficient details as to the process involved and evidence in reaching some of the conclusions made. As a result of this, the members feel that it is essential to understand the detail behind the due diligence process and the basis for determining its appropriateness. And Councillor Campbell, your reason for calling was to test that the appropriate procedures and processes were followed in reaching the decision. I'm going to open it up to members to question officers involved and Councillor Johnson, who was the Cabinet member involved in this particular one. I'm not sure that it's necessary at this point because you're all very quiet in the public gallery, but I would remind people that we very much want to keep this on a professional footing, and so any comments, please keep to yourselves until afterwards. Thank you. Councillor Bayford.
Chairman, may I request that we do a brief introduction? Would that be okay prior to actually receiving questions from members, if that's acceptable, please?
Thank you, that would be helpful. I think, Mr Cook, you want to do it? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. If it will be helpful then, I will set out the principal reasons for the Council determining that there was no valid expression of interest by River Oak LLC. The first set of reasons is that River Oak LLC could not demonstrate the investment resources to acquire and develop the site. So there are 5 subsections of that reason. The first being the need to demonstrate the resources to make an acquisition by negotiation in accordance with Council's advice to us. The second, the resources to achieve a viable airport in long-term operation, which River Oak LLC were unable to demonstrate. Thirdly, that the only confirmation of investment resources, aside from verbal assurances, is in a statement in an email from Rag Lawrence Graham, who are solicitors acting on River Oak's behalf. Rag state that they have been advised by their client of $1.6 million in investment resources and a general credit line of $400,000. As to the 1.6 million, no evidence was provided for scrutiny by the Council despite several requests. So to conclude the reasons under that category, even if verified, it was apparent that the $1.6 million level of investment identified was insufficient for the project, taking account of CPO costs, land values and subsequent development and operational requirements. So that's the first group of reasons. The second group, that River Oak could not provide 3 years financial accounts to demonstrate its financial status. Accounts were provided that were compliant with Delaware disclosure requirements, but they were unsuitable for assessing River Oak's operating record or overall financial position because they did not comply with generally accepted accounting practices. The second subsection under that group of reasons is the accounts provided by River Oak stated in the attached accounting policies, and I quote, "Accordingly, the financial statements are not intended to present the fund's financial position, results of operations, and changes in members' capital in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America." Thirdly, the accounts provided by River Oak covered only a fraction of the activities that have been identified in their submissions. And the last subcategory under that group of reasons, that the balance sheet provided by River Oak LLC was unaudited, it did not accord with generally accepted accounting principles, and it was not possible to assess River Oak's financial status from this information. And then the third group of reasons, the business plan provided did not demonstrate a viable airport in long-term operation. The duration of the plan was felt to be inadequate to provide assurance, as it only covered 5 years rather than the 20 years required by the Falcon report.
You've got a 20-year plan.
Sorry, please can I ask for you to remain silent? It's very important for us to be able to hear the information and to question the information that we're allowed to operate without participation from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. If I continue with that reason, it covered 5 years rather than 20 years required by the Falcon report, which I think members will be aware of that report. And a long-term business plan is required for major investments such as private finance initiative projects or, for example, housing revenue account business plans, usually 30 years. Thank you. The plan did not make adequate provision for the cost of making the CPO and acquiring and developing the site as envisaged in the Falcon report. The revenue projections appeared optimistic given the previous history of the airport and the findings of the Falcon report, and some of the expenditure assumptions appeared optimistic. For example, $30,000 a year for the security of a 720-acre airport site, and also the provision for air traffic control and fire cover. And then to conclude, those being the principal reasons, some feedback from the Council External Auditors, Grant Thornton LLP, who emailed me on the 5th of January. I'll read that out with your indulgence, Chairman. From an early stage, you and the Council's management have kept us informed of developments and have updated us regularly through to the recent Cabinet decision not to proceed with the CPO. You explained the basis of the soft marketing approach for an indemnity partner for the potential CPO, which was that the Council did not have the resources to act alone and needed a private sector partner with sufficient resources to fund the necessary investment, with a business plan that would satisfy both the Council and the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government in due course. Given these requirements, which we have no issue with, the Council initiated a due diligence process to gain assurance that such a partner would be able to deliver on these, which we also consider a reasonable and sensible approach. Subject to the observation that there are areas of discretion which remain a matter for the Council to determine, such as the number of years covered by the business plan. You also informed us that the only potential indemnity partner was the River Oak Company and that the financial information provided by the company was not sufficient to provide the assurance you required. Given this, the conclusion in section 6 of your report to Cabinet of 11th December 2014, Manston Airport Exploration of CPO Indemnity Partner, that the use of Party A, i.e. River Oak, as an indemnity partner on the basis of the financial information provided would therefore constitute a high risk option, appears reasonable to us. In the light of this, your recommendation in the report not to proceed with the CPO does not give rise to any concerns from our perspective. The decision not to proceed was ultimately taken by members after consideration of all the circumstances, and as per previous discussions, it is not our role to comment on the validity of the final decision. So thank you, Chairman. So that summarises the reasons and the feedback from Grant Thornton UK LLC. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bayford.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I don't really know what to do now because Mr Cook's raised a number of issues that I think need exploring, and it wasn't what I intended to do. I wanted to start with, in chronological order, which was really to start right at the beginning with some idea of the politics behind this, and I wonder whether we could sort of hold Mr Cook's stuff and come back and examine that a little bit later. Is that okay? And I would like to right now ask Councillor Johnson a couple of questions. I don't know how you want to do this, Mr Johnson. Shall I ask you the first three and see how we go? Okay. First of all, what I'd like to know is, going right back to the time when this council was first approached by River Oak about a potential CPO partnership with us, what political steer were officers given by leader and cabinet at that time and subsequently? Second question is, could you explain how the Labour Group's resolution in October not to proceed with the CPO at all would impact on your decision-making options? And thirdly, at the Cabinet meeting when a decision was taken, Councillor Harrison stated in Cabinet that he hadn't seen the background papers and was relying solely on the officer's report, which I think is fair to say was quite thin. Do you believe that that's a credible scenario? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bayford. I became the leader on the 15th of May, as you know, but Mrs Gloag had decided to close the airport in March and went out to consultation with staff. There was no requirement, as you know, to go out to public consultation, and that's something we're going to be pushing for in the future through the Select Committee. I think it's an important point to make early on. There was no steer given apart from on the weekend after I became the leader. Councillor Nicholson and I spoke on the phone and we agreed that he would speak to Mrs Homer to discuss whether we could progress with the CPO, but the only way we could do it as a council was with a back-to-back investor that met all our costs. There had been a suggestion at the Winter Gardens meeting in April that the council should CPO the airport. Having been through the CPO of Dreamland and the CPO of the Fort Hotel, which are still not quite finished, particularly the Dreamland one for compensation, we're very wary of the difficulties. You know, from April 2010 to now, we're still sorting out some detail of Dreamland, so it can be a 5-year issue. You know that. You were the leader at a time when some of the CPOs were made, and they are not simple. And I sat in this office, in this room here, through the days and days of the CPO of Dreamland and the difficulties and the amount and cost on either side, so I understood that. So there wasn't a steer as such, apart from Councillor Nicholson on the Monday after I became the leader, speaking to Mrs Homer to see what we could do about a back-to-back investor. River Oak we knew vaguely, really, through Mr Freudman. Richard Nicholson and I knew Mr Freudman from the Wiggins days. I've been a councillor for 20 years now. We knew him well. We trusted him, we know him well. So we go on from there. Mrs Gloag says she's closing the airport. Various offers had been made to buy it by River Oak, which she had not accepted. We understand that 5 million, 6 million, 7 million, we were told around the time, and she refused. KCC did not want to deal with them as the more senior authority, but we thought we needed to give an opportunity. And that's why Richard spoke to Mrs. Homer to ask her to investigate. I then knew of the petition that was being collected. I'm a great, as you all know, a supporter of the airport and how it was best to do this. The petition was due to be brought into the council, and on the 10th of July, the chairman kindly waived some of the rules to allow the petition to be heard. And that was, this is how important this airport is to us. Immediately, you kindly seconded my resolution that night on looking at the legal and financial implications. And then I called an urgent cabinet meeting for the 17th of July so we could look at the next stage on. And then we, on the 31st of July, went out and said officers should look into the market testing. And that was for the month of August. And you've got it in the report here. So from that point of view, we did a considerable amount of work in a very brief space of time from the day that I became the leader. And of course, Councillor Clive Hart had also been having meetings before that time. So Roger had set up a task force that met, I think, in March, but it hasn't met since, and that to me has always been a disappointment. You ask a question about a Labour group decision. I am absolutely fascinated by how people know about a Labour group decision. Your political meetings are probably held privately. Labour group meetings are held privately. I've spoken to the Labour Party solicitor, and for a forum like this to ask a question about a decision that actually has been very inaccurately portrayed, including in newspapers, the recommendation for the Labour Party solicitor to me was that we actually needed to go to the press complaints about something that was published that was untrue. But I've left it. We move on. It's an emotional time for everybody, but that was misinformation and, shall I say, factually incorrect is the word. Now, the background papers, Councillor Harrison mentioned about the background papers. The Council had signed a confidentiality agreement. Our officers were asked by River Oak to have a confidentiality agreement, which they signed. So officers were seeing papers that we weren't allowed to see as elected members. However, you and the leaders of other parties were invited by me to every meeting that I had with River Oak where it was possible, and we were in a position to get a lot of information in those meetings that I mightn't have known about if I'd had to rely on officers breaching that confidentiality, which of course they couldn't do. So, in fairness, I think we haven't seen all the papers, and in fact, the papers that arrived on Christmas Eve here, I'm seeing papers from River Oak now that I never saw before, and neither did officers in here. And the pack that they've sent to the Minister with our support doesn't actually bear that much relationship to some of the papers that came in by the 29th of August or in time for the 16th of October when we could have made a decision at Cabinet, but we extended the time again to the 11th of December. So there's been papers, as River Oak realises maybe they should have sent us everything at the beginning. They had been sending us different papers right up to the deadline. And then, after the deadline, after the vote was taken at Cabinet, they've been sending 56 members papers that I certainly never saw before. So I hope that answers your question. I think we have been very fair. We extended the time from the end of August through to the 11th of December because I am passionate about the airport, despite the crucifying stuff that goes on about me and the calls for me to resign by the both against the airports, the for the airports, and the political opportunists all want my head on a plate. I wouldn't still be here arguing for the airport. I wouldn't be going on the 2nd of February to the Select Committee to argue for the airport. I wouldn't have written to Howard Davies within days of me becoming the leader in support of the airport if I didn't think that the airport might have a future. But it can't have a future with a council that is absolutely strapped for cash. All the other things that we have to do. And if you are sitting in my position as the leader and privately I believe you think I'm doing the right thing. We're doing everything possible to get it right. So the games that are played out in public, let's be honest with each other. You've been in every meeting you've been invited to, and so have the other leaders. And Councillor Rita Wiltshire has always said to me, thank you for doing it.
Mr. Bayford, has that answered the questions?
Well, no, it hasn't answered the questions, and I do think I need to correct you. I haven't said in meetings that I believe you're doing the right thing. There may be certain aspects that I believe you've done the right thing, but plenty of things that I believe you haven't done the right things. You have been more open than you needed to be in terms of being inclusive where meetings are concerned, but I'm sorry, I don't think that this can be one of those things where we kind of drag everybody in and say, well, it's all down to all of us, because it isn't. You know, the decision that was taken was very clearly a cabinet decision, and I'd like to put it on record now that it isn't a decision that I think that I would have made, but then, as you pointed out, I'm not in your position, so I don't know exactly what you were party to and all those kind of things. I'd like to come back because it is a thing of some contention. You talk about press complaints and whatever about the reporting of the Labour group's meeting. I have to say that it's been pretty well trailed that there was a meeting where a resolution was tabled and passed not to proceed with the CPO at all, and I've not seen that denied in many places. You know, the numbers that were reported might not be correct, but I think in substance it's correct, but this is your opportunity to tell us that that's wrong. What I'm more interested in really is how a decision that's taken by your group actually potentially fetters you as the leader of that group, the leader of this council. Because it does seem to me that you know, you're on the horns of a dilemma if you actually disagree with what your group say.
Councillor Johnson, would you like to respond to that?
Obviously, I'd love to do a fly on the wall with your group when some of them disagree with you about the airport, because I know they do. Anyway, let's move on from that. Our group have meetings before full council. Our meetings have group meetings whenever we need to have them. On the 16th of October, a paper had been prepared by our officers, very similar to the one of December the 11th. And we decided, with a lot of support from my cabinet member behind me, Councillor David Green, that we would extend the time to give River Oak more time. This is the Labour group, the Labour cabinet, making a decision that on the 16th of October we weren't going to close the door on River Oak. So if you're telling me that I was going to be bound by decisions that you haven't a clue about, which you haven't, Bob, and you have been included, and you have been open, and let's be open in this meeting here where you know you've got an audience. This is not an easy thing. We are very much bound by advice from our officers. When we were progressing down perhaps the CPO with a bank-to-back investor, I immediately asked Councillor Worrell, as the Chair of Governance and Audit, to please keep an eye on this and please, if necessary, monitor throughout the whole process. I went to see Simon Webb, who's our internal auditor, and asked him to keep an eye on everything that I was doing as the leader of this council. I believe that has happened. I wrote to you, Councillor Gideon, and quite rightly, even before our decision, to say, when this decision is made, I would want it to come to scrutiny. You were quite interested in bringing it to scrutiny, and because you and I, you know, have reason to be accused of things, apparently, we both decided, I think it was best that 5 members brought it to scrutiny. But I wanted scrutiny to look at it, I want governance and audit to look at it, but I have every confidence that the officers have not let us down in the advice they gave us for December the 11th. I'll also tell you that despite what officers tell me, I was doing my own due diligence. And I have emails that tell me that the officers told us that we were correct. And some of those emails, which were confidential to me, which might come out someday from River Oak, will tell you that I felt I couldn't do anything else except listen to our officers. And the figures have been given this evening about the $1.6 million and the $400,000. Knowing what we've had to pay in legal advice on Dreamland alone, it would not cover it. So everybody's pushing for political purposes coming up to May for this to be this council's problem. It's actually national government's problem. It's a strategic airport. It needs to be open if it's counted by government as of a strategic importance. And to land that ball, which we picked up and ran with and are doing our best about, has been pretty messy. But we've done our bit. It's now up to national government. And that's what John Hayes and I were meeting about, and he's coming down again in February.
Thank you. Yes, I'm going to allow Councillor David to speak, but I do want to say that I think it's really important that we do try to keep within the detail of the calling. When we start getting personal and anecdotal, it doesn't help anybody's cause. Thank you.
Quite Yeah, and I'm just in straight response to one of the things that Councillor Mrs Johnson has said. I'd like to ask the question, were River Oak ever actually told how much money you did expect them to I don't know, put to one side, declare they had or whatever towards this CPO process? And if so, how much was that?
I do believe you're in the meeting when Richard Nicholson said the figure of 25 million in an escrow account in this country would be very satisfactory.
Can I just... that is surprising. I just wanted to come back just to clarify a question that the Councillor Beaufort asked that I believe you sort of answered, but I wasn't quite sure, so I just want to confirm. One of the key issues I think that we called it into review and scrutiny is to understand what level of detail the Cabinet had in order to make the decision to agree with the officer's report. Am I right in understanding from what you said that because this is what you said, I'm not sure that it's accurate, but a confidentiality agreement between River Oak and the council meant that members of this council were not entitled to see paperwork that officers could see, including cabinet members and including you as the portfolio holder, and therefore the only information you had to hand on which you based your decision was the paper that was presented with the officer's report. Is that correct?
That's not correct. We have considerable information from our officers throughout, but there was confidential information that obviously officers were not allowed to share with us. In fact, even this evening, and I've questioned this, it talks about officers having information. This evening, yet 56 councillors have had the pack. It doesn't free me yet to show my emails that I had from River Oak, yet River Oak have shared some of the emails they sent to me. No, we had enough information based on our due diligence, extending time after time to get the evidence that we needed. And also, one of the latter meetings we had with River Oak, where we definitely asked all the questions, because there are these difficulties about American companies allowing you to know who their investors are. And we understood that, and it's been a bit of a learning curve to know that a company cannot tell you who their investors are. In this country, you need to know exactly, because you need to know about money laundering. And that was a difficulty. But Mrs. Homer would like to come in.
Yes, I'll have you comment, but I'd also like to ask you if in fact what Councillor Johnson said is correct, that Cabinet were given a lot of background information in order to make this decision. Why was that information not made available to the scrutiny panel? Because we've called in the decision on the basis of needing to see the evidence, and we have been presented with no evidence from this council.
I'm sorry, I'm not even coming along, but actually we weren't freed up till the 23rd of December to share the information with the Minister, and we had to ask and ask, could it be done? Now, the Scrutiny Committee can have this meeting in private, and the public will wonder what you're talking about, but you wanted this meeting in public, I want it in public, but if you have papers in here that are still confidential, commercially sensitive, and I understand Mr. Young has already reiterated that, there's commercially sensitive papers of theirs that they would not want us to discuss in open session. Surely you understand that?
I have to contradict you, Councillor Johnson, because it's my understanding that we have received assurances from River that we can discuss everything in public. But really what I'm asking you is, you've now said that you didn't see any information until the 23rd of December, but the decision was made on the 11th of December. So what I'm asking you is, before the 11th of December, it's a very simple question. Before the 11th of December, what information did Cabinet and you as the portfolio holder have in terms of background with which to make this decision? It's a very simple question. Before the 11th of December, because either you're saying that you didn't see anything until the 23rd of December, or you saw things, and then my question is, why haven't we seen them?
I have here a list of all the meetings that were held and with River Oak, where there were thoroughly asked questions that we knew we needed to ask. Of course you're going to ask questions. Which company are we dealing with? Are we dealing with the parent company or the subsidiary that was opened on the 3rd of July at Delaware? The questions were asked very publicly in our meetings with cross-party representatives. Of course we had information to have an informed decision. You're playing games on the 11th of December. I'm sorry, Chair, and some people don't think you should be chairing this because you are being political. We would not have made that decision at the present time, if you look at the recommendation. At the present time, we felt that we had enough information from officers not to proceed with that company, that we had extended the time from the 29th of August through to the 11th of December. That's the facts of it. The process is what we're supposed to discuss at overview and scrutiny. If you wish to discuss the process, no one could have gone through this process more diligently.
Councillor Johnson, I am chairing this meeting. We are looking at process and we are looking at evidence. And if you see, this is included the reasons for the calling. So I'd just like to ask, Madam, you wanted to make a comment on something that Councillor Johnson said earlier, and if you could maybe talk, explain, because all we're asking for as a scrutiny panel is the evidence, which is the reason for the calling. It's as simple as that. And I'm not minded to take third-party evidence, because the evidence surely must come from this council, because we are the scrutiny panel of Thanet District Council, not of any third party.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to take the opportunity not to comment on what Councillor Johnson has said, but to clarify our understanding in respect of the confidentiality agreement. I think it's fair to say that as a result of the soft market testing, we struggled to actually obtain any information from River Oak as part of that process in order for us to undertake our assessment. Now, as a result of that, getting on towards the end of October, taking into account the fact that the soft market testing deadline originally was the end of August, we did undertake to agree with River Oak to enter into a confidentiality agreement, one that we actually drafted, on the basis of trying to provide River Oak with some reassurance that they could provide us with some information on a confidential basis in order that officers could assess their financial status in respect of the soft market testing exercise. Now, that was on the basis that they had raised concerns with officers in as constructive a way as possible, that they were unsure that if they released information other than under a confidentiality agreement, that it would actually stay within the council. That was the concern that they raised. So we agreed at that stage that it would just be shared with officers. That was the intention, in order for us to finalise and get somewhere with the soft market testing exercise. Now, since then, it is fair to say that River Oak have moved their position on that on a gradual basis, and have literally this week, literally yesterday, agreed for us to share the information in public that they gave to us, except for one particular issue in the public domain, enabling us to actually have this meeting this evening in public. I would remind members also that we did discuss with Cabinet the possibility of having a Cabinet meeting on the 11th of December in private session on a pink item, whereby we could have attached a number of annexes that were shared with us through the information sent by River Oak on the basis of that confidentiality agreement, but it wouldn't be possible to have that meeting in public. Therefore, that report was restricted in the sense of the amount of information that we could put into it and the annexes that we were able to attach. Cabinet, I can entirely understand that reason for wanting to have it on white and not on pink, made that decision quite rightly, and it's their decision to make. Now, leaders of the groups and Cabinet have been involved in this process to a point, probably in my own experience, unknown in respect of such a process, because you do appoint officers to undertake the detailed assessment of that sort of information. We have a Section 151 officer who is professionally qualified and is the expert in order to actually assess the detail along the business plan and the financial information coming through. Now, I think that's my observations on the situation in respect of the confidentiality agreement. But should there be any other questions, happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Marsden.
Thank you, Chair. I had some questions about due diligence and other things, but I have to go back to something that Councillor Bayford asked Councillor Johnston, because it is absolutely relevant to this process and how this process is being conducted. And I'm hearing a lot of words coming out of Councillor Johnston's mouth, but none of them have answered the question. None of them. I asked at Cabinet for Councillor Johnston to confirm or deny whether there was a Labour group meeting which voted against having a CPO no matter who the indemnity partner. Councillor Johnston at that meeting said I was discourteous to ask that question. I consider that to be a legitimate question of a huge public interest which points to the whole process that is being undertaken. Councillor Bayford has asked that question again. You have an opportunity to confirm or deny whether the Labour group voted against a CPO, whatever night that was, in October, whatever the numbers of the votes. Would you like to take this opportunity to deny that?
Councillor, I have said numerous times in answer to this question that the Labour group, of course, like your group, will discuss Manston Airport. The Labour group meetings are confidential. However, the evidence, there's no need to smile, the evidence is that on the 16th of October, after a meeting on the 14th of October, we decided to continue with the process to the 11th of December. I don't know how more clearly I can make it. If the Labour group had decided there and then to tell me and instruct me to go ahead on the 16th of October to withdraw all negotiations with Riverwalk or anybody else, do you think I would have gone against that? On the night of the 16th of October, we extended the time yet again and we had a progress report. I know you're looking excited at the kill, but you're not getting any further than that. This is not about a Labour group meeting. I know. It's not. I know you're disappointed about other things. This is not about a Labour group meeting. This is about a decision we had to make. We had to make a decision not to put this council at risk with an indemnity partner at the present time who didn't meet our due diligence. You should be protecting the council instead of trying to find out who said what where in our meetings. I know from some of your members what gets said at your meetings, but I'm not going to embarrass you by saying it here. Thank you.
Councillor Poole.
Thank you, Chair. I do find it rather interesting that Councillor Bayford and Councillor Marsden are actually subbing this evening. They're not usually members of the View and Scrutiny Committee. Can't you trust your members to ask the right questions? We're not playing politics, are we? No, of course not. And Chair, I really do think you shouldn't be chairing this evening. With your connections, the test is, what would the members of the public think, knowing all the facts? A representative. Right. I'm continuing. I think we've heard overwhelming evidence from Mr. Cook regarding the financial position of Woodrow, such that we should not, under any circumstances, proceed with the CPO. How much has the CPO process cost Thanet District Council, taxpayers, in money terms and in officer?
Councillor Poole, we have a very specific framework for questioning under the calling. Because the questions were relevant to the calling issues, not to the general issue of CPO or no CPO.
My question is...
Is your question to do with the calling, the answer to the calling, Councillor? Yes? Okay.
How much has the CPO process costs Thanet District Council taxpayers in money terms and in officer time? Has River Oak offered to reimburse TDC for this expenditure?
I'm not quite sure who was going to answer that, Councillor. Can I just ask once again, the members of the public, if you could keep your comments at a low level, because it's disturbing some of the panel, I believe. Councillor Poole, did you wish for an answer to that question from whom?
He's shaking his head. Don't take it up. You're chairing it.
I'm asking you, Councillor Poole, who would you like to answer the question? Councillor Poole, I'm asking you who you would like your question addressed to. Chief Exec, would you like to answer Councillor Poole's question?
Yes, Councillor Poole. The costs so far in respect of the soft market testing and indemnity process, in respect of obtaining legal advice and also in respect of the work undertaken by Falcon comes to about £26,000. I haven't got a figure on officer time, I'm afraid, other than to say that obviously Thanet District Council has committed quite a lot of officer time to this particular subject.
And
The second part is, have River Oak offered to reimburse us for that sum?
River Oak have not offered to reimburse us for the costs we've incurred so far. Safe to say there was an initial offer for River Oak around obtaining some advice to do with indemnity agreements, but that's too preemptive for us to have been engaging around that particular item. So we haven't had an offer to pay for the money that we've spent so far in respect of those particular items of expenditure, and the TDC, to be fair, has not requested or asked for it.
Councillor Campbell.
Yes, Chair, just as a point of information, really, I suppose. As the ex-chair of, and I say ex-chair of the Labour Group, I'm not going to discuss what happens at private Labour Group meetings. What I can tell everybody present is that it's specifically against Labour Party rules for a Labour Group to instruct an executive. It cannot do so. It can pass a resolution if it chooses to. I'm not suggesting it did, but it can do. But that does not bind the executive. At any level, local government or national level, the executive are free to make their own choice.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Campbell. Are there any further questions? Councillor Gregory.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question for the Acting Chief Executive, really. I'd like to ask her views. When you consider the thing we're looking at tonight, and this particular agenda item, one of the reasons for the calling was that the report before Cabinet didn't contain sufficient details. Now we're finding out there was more detail, and in fact the Section 151 officer has confirmed that. Can I ask why it wasn't in the report to this Scrutiny Committee? Because we cannot make a decision on evidence given to us tonight verbally in a proper and valid way unless we've had it in paper prior to the meeting. I understand all this bit about confidentiality for River Oak, and then they decided they didn't want it confidential. Okay, but Cabinet would have made a decision with comments from the officers, and we have not seen those comments other than picking up pieces from Mr Cook, from yourself, from the leader, and also piecing them together with the paperwork we've got here. So I think it's a valid, my concern is that the report that this panel has before it is not comprehensive enough to allow us to make the proper judgments, and I just wonder why that is.
Would you like to comment?
I think I explained earlier, and forgive me, I hope I'm understanding your question correctly, I'm sure you'll pick me up if I'm not, but Cabinet made a decision to not to have their report on as a pink item, hence we did not attach confidential items to that. They wanted the report to be alright so that the debate and the decision could be made in public. You have pulled in Cabinet's decision, so we have a copy of Cabinet's report, i.e. the information that went to Cabinet. We, again, would not have provided over Scrutiny with any further detailed information without having to actually put that on Pink and satisfy ourselves that we would not be breaching the confidentiality agreement which TVC is still bound by. And I would remind members that it was not until yesterday that we were actually given sufficient advice from Riverroad that we were able to discuss in public the financial details that were sent through to us as part of undertaking the soft market testing exercise. Now, if there had been a request to us to provide all of that detailed information on Pink, I'm sure officers would have accommodated that, but again, the decision in discussions with the chair was that this should be a meeting in public, and we wouldn't have been able to release that information to the public prior to yesterday's confirmation email.
Yes, you can come back, but I think I ought to come in there, given that there was reference to discussions as to whether the meeting should be open or not. I have always believed that the public have a right to know, and that it was absolutely in the public interest that this should be open, and therefore we shouldn't be discussing things that weren't available. But I'm a bit uncomfortable with the suggestion that any background detail is confidential, because I've been a councillor for 12 years, and we have received any number of reports which can allude to things without veering into the pink, if you like, because we don't necessarily need to know financial numbers, but the grounds upon which something is decided can be reported without confidential information in the way that you're suggesting. And what I had hoped for, really, was that we could have a greater level of detail, and Mr. Cook, you provided it at the outset of this meeting, but for the benefit of the committee, that we would have had what you provided at the outset in the run-up to the meeting as paperwork, and a little more detail as to the process of the due diligence, because we have a very generic due diligence protocol attached, but it is very generic, and it doesn't seem to me beyond the realms of reporting to actually say what specific requirements were placed on this specific soft marketing exercise. And I did in fact ask for that some 3 weeks before, 2 weeks before the Christmas break. So I was disappointed, I have to say, that we didn't have any supplementary information on white that could have helped the committee to understand better the detail behind the officer's report, given that, as Councillor Johnson said, Cabinet were given, albeit verbally, more detail than what is presented to us.
If I may respond to that, it is my view that actually the report that went to Cabinet on the 11th of December did exactly that. As far as possible we were able to do within the confines of the confidentiality agreement, we did put in as much information around the process and the information we had. The reason that Paul Cook this evening has been able to talk in a bit more detail in part of his introduction is because yesterday, as I said, we were released from that confidentiality agreement not in totality, but to the point that we were able to give a bit more detail as part of the introduction this evening. It is disappointing in the sense that Riverroad weren't able to enable us to do that early, but that's not down to TDC. That is Riverroad's choice around when and whether they did that, and I can't, we are unable to comment on that any further.
Can I just ask if you asked Riverroad if they were happy for this information to be made available to the Scrutiny panel, or if, how it came about that they released the council from the confidentiality agreement? Did the council actually specifically ask them to do?
Sorry, Chair, we're blaming something. Yes, we did, and I did the emails myself, and I can say that over a period of time we persistently tried to clarify the position with regard to the confidentiality agreement with River Oak, and it really was as a result of an email we received late yesterday afternoon that they effectively gave us enough clarity to enable Mr Cook to do what he did tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Whilst I understand the need for everything as far as possible to be on white so that the public can see what their council are doing for them or not doing for them, I think that's perfectly laudable. However, in our role as a scrutiny committee, it's very difficult to scrutinise a small document like this when we're now led to, well not led to believe, we know that there is a considerable amount of information that we haven't seen. And I know River Oak sent a very nice folder out for every member of the council, and I understand some members of the council have lost theirs already. But what I would say is that if it had been necessary to fulfil our scrutiny function in the best possible manner for the people of Thanet, then okay, I would have accepted that we had to go on to pink for some of it. Not that that seems to hide much, but my view is that in future when we have reports, and if we're going to lose information because it cannot be made public, it would be nice to have the opportunity as councillors to say, okay, I'm willing to stick by the rules of pink paperwork for the efficient operation of the scrutiny committee, because the scrutiny panel seem to be consistently having their hands tied behind their backs. And I think that is wrong in terms of the correct running of a public body.
Councillor David.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I'd like to go back now to Mr Cook's opening address and some of the things that he raised there, and just sort of find out a bit more about them, really. It seems to me through the process that a lot of the time, again going back to how Councillor Johnson was there, and we were exposed to a lot of information along the way. It seemed that a lot of the difficulties seem to stem from the fact that the council's due diligence process, which seems strangely to have only become codified after the event rather than before it, but the council's due diligence process is absolutely fine if we're looking at a company to fix the roof here. And they're British-based, and and probably kind of known around the place and whatever. And it seems to me to be wholly inadequate when it comes to try and assess the viability, the stature, the financial clout of a private equity partnership based in America. So what I'd like to ask Mr Cook is what kind of criteria, if any, did he use to try and compare and contrast what he might have expected from, say, a UK-based PLC versus what he might have been able to have got from a private equity partnership? Whether he took any outside advice in real time about how to actually dig down into the finances of what is, it seems to me, a fairly substantial company that's completed over $1 billion worth of business, over 50 projects, over 15 years. And certainly from some of the paperwork that they provided to us as councillors since, do seem to have significant funds that could be available to them. But in any case, it's not necessarily the way they work. It's not necessarily about having the funds available today. It's about having the funds available when it comes to actually doing the project. So I'd like him to explain a little bit more how we went about that. And also, can you confirm that we actually went to Grant Thornton to actually appraised the decision after the event, after the decision was taken, rather than whilst his report was being compiled. And there's something there that seemed to make it a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because you actually said something along the lines of that Grant Thornton quite understood that River hadn't been able to satisfy your financial requirements, so of course you were right not to go along with it, which does seem to kind of not make it a very objective assessment of what you actually did. You also seem to put a lot of weight on the Falcon report. Now, I think it is fairly common knowledge what we paid for that report, and certainly seems to me that for what we paid, we couldn't have expected much more than a fairly insubstantial bit of desk research. And that, again, seems to be a fairly flimsy point of evidence on which to actually make a decision, make a recommendation that's actually going to be fundamental to the way the economy of this island develops going forward, because what it is at the moment is going to develop without an airport, and there's a lot of people that think it's all the worse for that. So I'd be interested to know a little bit more about that, Mr. Cook, please.
Thank you. I think I've got a note of all those, but I'm sure you'll come back to me if I miss any out. As regards the criteria, those are set out in the December report. They were chosen as being appropriate for a soft marketing exercise, including input from technical finance staff and strategic procurement. They are in keeping with a soft marketing process and they reflect good practice. We have made checks with other authorities undertaking similar exercises, and they are the same checks that they would apply. On the point about the suitability for the particular applicant, I think there is a level, and this is set out in Council's advice, that we must achieve our own assurance, and we need to satisfy ourselves as a council and ensure we don't take on excessive financial risk. So whilst I feel we have gone a long way in meeting with River Oak at various stages and discussions with them to try and reflect their particular situation, including the signing of the confidentiality agreement, I think on the other hand we must satisfy ourselves basically that for an English local authority, we've properly assessed the situation and managed the risk. As to the involvement of Grant Thornton, if I could just explain that in a little more detail, we have throughout the process kept Grant Thornton informed of what we were doing, because as you probably know, we have regular meetings which sometimes include the leader with the lead partner, the audit manager, so they were well aware of what we were doing. However, I felt that the way they expressed their opinion on what we're doing was perhaps was slightly negative, in the sense of saying, we have no problems with this. It wasn't a more positive assessment, and therefore there was some consideration of whether they could look at it in a different way outside their external audit remit, but it was felt there wasn't really much they could add to their external audit view, and it wasn't taken forward. So I think the advice they've given us stands, and that is the nature of their external audit appointment. As the Falcon report, it was accepted by Cabinet, I can't recall a precise date. So it was used as part of the soft marketing process and issued, issued with the soft marketing questionnaire. So that was a fundamental part of the process going forward, on which we based an analysis of the responses. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, can I just come back and ask you really just one question, I suppose, that if the will, the political will had been more imperative, if you like, towards wanting to see a CPO take place, and given that there was only one game in town, are you saying that you couldn't possibly have judged River Oak by any other standards, that you couldn't have taken any other view than the one that you reached? And in fact, are you effectively saying that, as far as you're concerned, you don't consider River Oak good for the money? Because I think that's fairly crucial if we're saying that your report is what's actually led to the decision.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I couldn't answer a political question, but I feel an assessment of the risk has been carried out on proper criteria, and as far as possible, we endeavoured to set out in the 11th of December Cabinet report what those criteria were, and as far as possible, given that the confidentiality agreement was in place, the reasons for the decisions against those criteria. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson. Yes.
Very quick point, because the report that we were going to have on the 16th of October from officers was very similar to what we did have on the 11th of December, which was shared cross-party. We knew we had a problem, but officers, did go back and try even harder for us to see if we had found a CPO partner that we could go ahead with. So on the 16th of October we could have been finished with this, but we continued to the 11th of December because officers did listen to us, did come back, and this is the report on the 11th of December with all that extra effort. And again, Councillor Bayford, you were in meetings, papers were passed over to you that you could read, we spent time going through things, we thoroughly did our homework, and that's why and officers put it in at the present time about the CPO, because we have not found an indemnity partner despite all those extensions. We now have an opportunity on the 2nd of February to talk about capacity in the South East when I go and others go to London. That's important. I have a meeting with Sir Roger Gale again on Friday. We continue to talk about the importance of the airport, but a long-term future. The pain of the closure in March and the families who lost their jobs, and I know many of them who still call me and tell me how they're doing, is so important. We couldn't risk an indemnity partner that 2 years down the line did exactly the same as Mrs. Globe did. A promise of somebody ending up with 720 acres of Kent land, who then tell us 2 years down the line, when they're paying us in tranches, by the way, for the money we've already spent. We've changed our minds, it's not working. And some of that document that we had this week telling us that we could free up information, there's still stuff in there that tells me we're not allowed to talk about some of the partners that River Oak would have to make that work. We're not allowed to mention them because of commercial sensitivity. Honestly, if I felt, that we haven't got this right on the 11th, I would say so. We extended from the 16th of October to the 11th of December to get more information to see we were absolutely right about the process, about the partner we were looking at, and about the long term. It's so important. We cannot let people down by starting to open up an airport under a CPO where we're paid bits of money when it comes in, and this council meets all the costs and the underwriting. Everything else we do here would crumble. You would not want us to do that.
Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. Just as a comment, really. In Councillor Bamford's question to Mr. Cook, there was inference that there was a political will to go forward with his process. Without, again, breaking internal Labour Party private conversations, I can absolutely tell you there was an excess of zeal by the leader and members of her cabinet to go forward with this particular process. In fact, much to the chagrin of some members of my group. That's absolutely truthful here. But I can assure you and Councillor Bayford, there was, as I said, an excess of zeal to go forward with this process. They were really bought into it. This is why, in October October, when the soft marketing process should have finished, it was extended until December. That only goes to prove and show the will that was there by the Cabinet to actually extend the process and offer the olive branch to Withrow to supply the necessary information to actually substantiate them as a valid partner. In the end, that hasn't happened, but the will certainly was there. I can assure everybody present it was there.
Thank you. Councillor Bayford.
Just a point of explanation, Councillor Cameron, that wasn't what I was suggesting at all. I wasn't trying to go back to that point. I mean, it may have been in the background to some earlier points, but it wasn't to that one at all. What I was really trying to get at, I suppose, is that in exactly the same way that if you ask two lawyers the same question, you can get two different answers, and those answers are often coloured by the answer they think you want to hear. My question really was, take the politics out of it, utterly and completely. My question to Mr. Cook is it conceivable that you could have had a different approach to assessing the River Oak due diligence that could have led you to actually suggesting that they could be a viable partner? That's at the bottom of this, I suppose getting at the end of the day, you saying that absolutely under no conceivable circumstances could you see that they would be a partner. Because if that's the case, I mean, it would lead to a follow-up question, which is, what's the situation going to be if the Ministry of Transport come back and say that they don't believe that the council would be in any risk if they proceeded with the proposition that's been put to the council so far?
Thank you, Chairman. The criteria are based on good practice appropriate to a soft marketing exercise. We have council's opinion that they are appropriate, and our external auditors do not have any issues with them. I believe they have been fairly applied, and that is the objective result of the soft marketing exercise. As to any future discussions with departments of the government, that's a matter for the future.
I'd like clarification because it was the first time this evening that I heard the figure 25 million in an escrow account. If that is the case, are you saying, Mr. Cook, that if the Minister comes back and says, well, we're satisfied that the finances look okay, that TDC would still insist on having 25 million in an escrow account before they could proceed with any partner?
You're taking this out of context. I was trying to make a point earlier because Councillor Bayford and many of us who sat around many a meeting about this subject, what sort of figure do you think would be a good one to have in an escrow account? And Councillor Nicholson thought, for comfort, 25 million would be good. But we didn't say to River Oak, we want you to put that in there tomorrow. We wanted some evidence that they're actually going to put something into some kind of an account in this country, which they haven't done yet. And they were promising to pay us in tranches. Now, we've had a lot of discussion about, I've been in Scrutiny in the 20 years I've been here many a time, and it is about the process. A petition came to the council, we listened to the people, we told them what we could try to do, we had several meetings that we didn't need to have very quickly by the end of July, and we processed from there on in and extended time after time. And Bob was in the room for many a time when we gave our officers quite a hard time because we wanted them to try to get this, that we could save the airport with a CPO if at all possible. Councillors were in the room of other parties hearing the difficult time our officers got about some of the questions that we were asking, go back and get the answers. And it has been very unfair to hear two officers sitting beside me who've been given a difficult time outside of here, who are actually only doing their job and giving us the advice. But we did give them a very hard time, cross-party in those meetings, to try to prove that we had done everything possible because a petition came in to ask us to do it. That's how democracy works. We didn't find an indemnity partner at this
time, on the 11th of December, we're now hearing all kinds of rumours that just before the general election, the government is going to step in and save Manston. Well, I think they should ring us up tomorrow and tell us they're going to save Manston and stop us all discussing this when we haven't the money to do it ourselves. It's going to be great fun to hear this announcement just before the general election that government is going to save the airport. They could have done it last March.
I'm not quite sure how that fits into the agenda item that we're on, Councillor Johnson, but it was a very fine political speech. Well done. Are there any more questions from members? Any more questions? In which case we have a recommendation. We have several options. Yes, Councillor Bayford. Sorry, I'll take you.
Well, I would like to move that the decision that no further action be taken at the present time on the CPO of Manston be reviewed as it was taken prematurely, given that the Minister of Transport is being consulted to give an opinion on the matter.
Do you have the wording of that written down, Councillor Bayford?
I won't be able to read it.
Thank you. Do we deal with this as an amendment, Mr. Boyle? Because it's sort of... No? As a motion. Right, it's a motion... Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Marson. Shall I read it out to you, members? Or if you... That the decision, quote, that we...
I should insist on it being written out.
That the decision that no further action be taken at this present time on the CPO of Manston be reviewed as it was taken prematurely, given that the Minister of Transport is being consulted to give an opinion on the matter. Is that clear, members? Do you want to read that again, please?
I want to put in evidence that the Minister of Transport is reviewing it, Chair.
Presumably... reviewed... sorry. The Minister is being reviewed by Cabinet. Can we have that, Councillor Benford? Yes? Because we need to say who's going to be reviewed by. So, I shall try again. That the decision that no further action be taken at this present time on a CPO of Manston be reviewed by Cabinet as it was taken prematurely, given that the Minister of Transport is being consulted to give an opinion on the matter. That has been proposed... yes, Councillor Campbell.
Chair, the problem with that is out of order. The reason it's out of order is this has been actually called in on the grounds that when the decision was taken in December, there wasn't enough evidence and information available to prove that Cabinet made that decision. What that is saying is that subsequent to that particular decision, something else has happened that may or may not alter the Cabinet's decision. That's a different issue and not to be decided at this meeting. This meeting is to scrutinise the calling of the original decision and the validity of that decision and the information provided to support that decision. That doesn't do that.
Can I correct you, Councillor Campbell? You will remember that the original decision was a decision in two parts. Councillor Johnston, I'm sure she will remember very clearly at the Cabinet meeting, added a second part, but it wasn't taken as two separate parts, it was voted on as one decision. And the second part of that one decision was that the matter be referred to the Minister. So effectively, the decision made by Cabinet was probably invalid because it was totally contradictory, because it said no further action should be taken, and at the same time, in the same vote, that the matter be referred to the Minister. Now, forgive me if I'm misunderstanding, but that is further action. So that was contained in the original proposition at that cabinet meeting.
What it actually said was at this time. At this present time. That's what it said. That was what... No, it doesn't make it worse, because at that present time, that was then a valid decision. Because the valid decision was taken on the understanding that it was at this present time. So at this present time, the Cabinet would not proceed with a CPO. At this present time. So that's what we're calling in, the decision and the appropriateness of the decision at that present time, not subsequently. If the Cabinet chooses and information comes back from this so-called minister who's actually going to look at these details and Christopher Rhodes, if he does or whatever, and makes a strategic or fundamental change to the decision to the validity of the ownership of Manston or CPO, then obviously that will change the decision of this council. But it doesn't affect the decision made at the time on December the 11th, which still is valid.
I have to disagree, Councillor Campbell, because if you read the decision, Part 2 of the decision says that subject to obtaining written consent from Party A, relevant information is sent to the Minister of State for Transport for consideration. So how can you take no action and do something at the same time? So I'm going to...
On the 11th of December, they decided not to proceed with the CPO at this present time. At this present time, 11th of December. However, they were going to send information on to this minister to consider. Then a decision may or may not alter or change or whatever in future in light of information received from that minister. But the decision at this present time was quite valid. And the proposition was quite valid.
And I think we're arguing over semantics, to be honest. Councillor Thanet.
Well, I would like to refer to the recommendation that is printed in our papers. And I think that the wording is absolutely relevant when we read that the requirements of the Council of CPO for the partner have not been met, and that it does not have the financial resources to pursue CPO in its own right. Now, I think that is a crucial thing, because this council cannot go ahead with, considering what has been explained this evening by Mr. Cook, I really do not think that this council is in a position to pursue the CPO, and this is exactly what the decision was taken by the Cabinet on the 11th of December. Now, if the Minister and the Government decide at a later stage that Manston needs to be funded, then that will be something that comes later. But at the moment, the calling was to do with the decision that was made and the fact that this Council does not have the financial resources to pursue CPO in its own right, regardless of what the Government might come up with, might decide in the weeks to come.
Thank you. Actually, the recommendation that is at the end of this calling is either that we recommend that no further action be taken or we refer the issue back. Councillor Bayford's motion, which is on the floor and has yet to be voted on, suggests that we should refer the matter back for consideration in the light of what the Minister is. So I really can't see why anybody would have an issue with that, given that, as everybody has said, if we knew now what we didn't know then, the decisions, can be changed. What you're suggesting is that at 11th of December, given the information that Cabinet had that we didn't have in scrutiny, it was the right decision, and therefore it was a moment in time, but it could change. Well, that doesn't seem to me, as nobody in the scrutiny panel, a particularly helpful position for us to take. All we're saying is that we just think we should look at it again. I have a motion on the floor. Can I just check, Mr. Boyle, is there any reason for calling in? Chairman, sorry.
Calling in, what's that? Are you changing it?
I'm just asking Mr. Boyle for a legal opinion.
Chairman, you would be looking at this. I mean, the concern, and I've heard what Councillor Campbell has to say, the concern we have is the net effect of what is now proposed actually is not an awful lot different from what was originally decided. So the question would be, are we not in a position of effectively, by a different wording, agreeing what was already agreed in Cabinet? And so therefore it's going back with effectively the same position it was in when Cabinet reached the original decision. Because as Councillor Campbell's explained, the decision that was taken on that day was at that time not to proceed with Manston, and that the matter was being referred as a point of 10.2 to the government for assessment, and effectively disillusioned Councillor Baker was put forward, but actually that's sort of kind of what it's saying now. I don't know if there's any suggested amendment that might be put forward that might make it more valid.
Well, but perhaps then we say that the decision be reviewed by Cabinet once the opinion of the Minister has been received.
It would seem to be not an issue if that's what Cabinet intend anyway, to actually just make that as a recommendation of oral scrutiny. In actual fact, the recommendation of the Cabinet meeting simply says that the information will be sent to the Minister. So this is just a kind of logical extension, if you like, that we would say, well, once it's sent, have a look at it, then reconsider. That doesn't seem to me entirely unreasonable. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you for letting me come back in. It was very clear in the meeting with the Minister and the two MPs and Mrs Hall and myself and some of the people that were there that the Minister had a very open mind. He'd been a county councillor, he understood the predicament, he took me to one side to say he understood the difficulty this council had with the CPO if we hadn't found an indemnity partner. He wanted to look at the paperwork. He was sent paperwork that isn't quite matching to the paperwork that we have, and that's been sorted out now. However, what Councillor Bayford is moving is pretty much endorsing what we said on the night, 10.1, 10.2. And, it's the greatest form of flattery, Councillor Bayford, but we don't really need you to do that. The Minister's going to look at the papers, the MPs are going to talk to each other. I'm getting it on very good account the government is going to step in and save us all before May. So, let them get on with it. We did the best we could with the information on the 11th that we would continue to look at this, but not at the present time. Okay?
Thank you, Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. All I'm trying to do really is to help you, because I think that the public would actually feel reassured if there was actually a recommendation from this committee for Cabinet to look at it again once you've got the Minister's view. So I can make you a local hero.
The Conservative members and a few others walked out of the council on the 16th of December, but I was asked by the press, would we reconsider? Of course we will reconsider, but the first thing we have to do is actually work with the owners, because that's part of the CPO process, to work with owners, and that was something that we moved very well on the night. Thank you.
I'll move that the question be put.
Councillor, I'm not quite sure which question you're putting at the moment. So there is a live motion, but Councillor David has suggested that he might be able to temper it in such a way that the entire committee might feel happy with it, which is my preference. May I suggest, what we've said is that we agree that currently there is not going to be any action until the information comes back from the Minister. And we just want to add that we recommend Cabinet review the decision in the light of...
New information received from the Minister.
Yes, exactly. Councillor Campbell, would you like to...
Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Thanet.
It's trying.
Can we suggest that the wording that the decision was premature in what Councillor David was suggesting is removed, because that is passing a judgment which I don't think is helpful.
Councillor David is happy for that bit of the word is being removed, and the second is content as well, yes? So, that the decision that no further action be taken at this present time on a CPO of Manston be reviewed on receipt of new information from the Minister of Transport. Moved, seconded, all those in favour? That is carried. Any against, any abstentions? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, members. Members of the public, if you wish to leave at this point, feel free to do so. Although you might miss the exciting update by Councillor Johnson on key projects. So, Councillor Johnson, I believe you're up now. Leave a couple of minutes for people to vacate and have comfort breaks and whatever. Since half the committee has decided it. 2 minutes. would you like to follow?
Right, thank you very much, Chairman. Some of the updates maybe have already been given in other places, exactly at full council and in the leaders' report, and Ramsgate Matters meetings, some neighbourhood engagement meetings, town team meetings. So I don't know whether you want me to go through all of those, but I have kind of, I can see you can't bear the excitement. The Oak Valley European funded projects at the harbour in Ramsgate, now, for example, that was reported in August to Ramsgate Matters. I know you weren't there, Chair, but you are. I'm making sure you're invited, as you know. That's my open for government here. York Valley Interreg, the redevelopment of the military road arches was delivered and successful. Traffic management, new barriers, prevent rapid development, proposals for new moorings for the Ramsgate Small Boat Owners Association developed and funded, resurfacing the commercial quay and new water supply completed, digital promotion of the port, etc. And yesterday we went to the boat show where it was very pleasing to see that our officers from the port, people were quite literally queuing up to talk about having berths down here, and I was watching because Dover was that side, Ramsgate was that side, and we were getting far more of the customers coming to us. So it's to the credit of our officers. We also had Emma from the Visitor Information Centre there, and so she was promoting Thanet as a whole, and I thought that was really very useful. Some of the things are big seafront projects around Ramsgate we can talk about, but the Royal Sands and the mediation process continues. The survey on the cliff wall is now received. The contracts are drafted and the financial checks are ongoing. The current information shows no negative impact on the valuation of the site, and therefore leaders will be progressing as agreed by Cabinet, monitored by the Cabinet Member for Finance and Estates. So that's Royal Sands Pleasurama. It's moving on apace now. It's more to be done. Just a bit more to be done. The Royal Pavilion and Wetherspoons exchanged contracts with TDC at the end of last year. They're now complete subject to Wetherspoons getting planning permission. So I haven't seen that come in, but it's on its way. We had presentations from Wetherspoons probably nearly less than a year ago, when Clive was still the leader, and I have to say the Ramsgate Society was in the room. People were generally pleased with how they were moving forward, but these things take time. Dreamland, I've asked for a briefing for all members, and it'll be early February. Again, we touched on it earlier about the CPO for Dreamland. That all started in April 2010, and here we are still resolving issues, still waiting to hear about the compensation to owners. That will be a decision outside of this building, but it will be something we have to keep money for. So the lease discussions are ongoing with Sands Heritage. And because we know Sands very well through the connections with the hotel in the High Street, and the consortium have pulled together, that's making good progress. The scenic railway, we had the issue with the high winds, Boxing Day, and a small part came down, but the contractor absolutely, spoke solidly that he felt that they were getting on with it very quickly, and I know we were all pleased to hear that, and they cleared the site very, very quickly, and we're getting on with work again. The main works contract for building is progressing. We had a walkabout at least 6 weeks ago into the cinema, work progressing very, very well. We got the 1.8 million coastal communities money. That was a great help for the Seaside Cafe, and that's how it's been with any of these projects. It's finding where money is and getting it in to support us to do the work. I'm not sure if I need to go through an awful lot of other things that are happening. As I say, I do the presentations to full council and at all the meetings we go to outside. So I'm ready for questions if you wish. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Any questions from members? I just wanted to ask you mentioned Pleasurama progressing. Can I just check that, does that mean that Cardiff have now brought SSP? That whole legal transfer of ownership has been completed, because you were talking about due diligence. Presumably that's a card, isn't it, of
Yeah, that is a matter between that company and the other company. But I think, would you like to expand on that, or are you allowed to?
I haven't been involved in
You haven't been involved. But from our point of view, there was a process that had to be gone through of mediation, get to a certain stage, and the contracts are drafted and financial checks are ongoing. I think that's as much as I can say right now, but I think we're making quite good progress at this stage.
Yes, I mean, obviously we went into quite some detail at the previous meeting. What I meant to ask, and if it's confidential, then fair enough. But when you say contracts are being drafted, contracts have to be drafted between parties, and I just wonder who the parties are.
Things are being processed. I think if we wait for a cabinet report, that would be useful. Madeline, do you want to answer?
I think we've given you as much as an update as we are entitled to give this evening, so forgive us. We will obviously bring a more formal update when those negotiations have got to a point to enable us to do it. Safe to say that the cabinet member, portfolio holder, is obviously involved in it as well, so we will, when we're able, bring a more detailed update on progress. And I think the reason we're saying negotiations are taking place is because that is exactly where we are. It's still in negotiation, so there's nothing finalised on that at the moment.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I mean, obviously, it's very difficult for us to know how confidential whatever is going on is, because we don't know what's going on. And because it was voted at scrutiny that it's not coming back to scrutiny, I just wanted to make sure that we are able to be informed if we're not able to call in. I think that's really the position that I found. Are there any other questions from members? No? Then we move on to agenda item 7. I'm going to ask Mr. Cook to talk to us. I just wanted to explain, members will remember we had it was a call, wasn't it? A discussion around the Vattenfall farm monies, and as a result of that, the overall Scrutiny panel voted that we should have a paper prepared to address the issue of external gifts and how they were handled. And I think there's been a little bit of confusion because shortly after there were papers on due diligence and grant giving of the council's money, which is not what we were asking about. So we haven't received a paper on the thing that we wanted tonight, but Mr. Cook will explain.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to apologise to the committee that we don't have the paper. We are progressed in preparing the protocol. However, as members may appreciate, it is rather peak time of the financial year for the finance teams, working on the budget and other issues. So I didn't feel we'd been able to take it forward to the quality of report that I would expect to come here. So I will ensure that it comes back to the next meeting, which I believe is in March. I hope that's acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Obviously, this protocol, Mr. Boyle will advise me. Is it proper that this should initially come to governance and audit? Governance and audit look at process and protocol to ensure that process and protocol exist, yeah? And then scrutiny actually look at the application of that process and protocol.
Councillor Campbell said governance and audit would effectively monitor the policy, not create it. You're quite right that there is a governance and audit slide, and we've had conversations with Mr. Cook about the fact that it sits somewhere between overview, scrutiny, governance and audit. So
it certainly does, but the difficulty is that we don't want scrutiny taking place at governance and audit. We don't want governance taking place at scrutiny. This is the thing, because this is a mixture that's always happened. My point is that I'm not suggesting that the members of governance and audit create this protocol, but I'm suggesting that it's presented to governance and audit, the chair is here, so that the governance and audit can look at the protocol, ensure that they feed some proper and apt document. Yeah? Then whenever allocation of monies is actually allocated external monies, then the Scrutiny Committee can scrutinise whether or not the process and protocol has been actually fairly applied.
Chairman, yes, we will ensure that is done.
Councillor Cameron, I think it was actually you that proposed this report. So it was a courtesy to you that it would come back here first and then go into governance and audit.
I'm confused that I wasn't on governance and audit at the time.
Yes, exactly. So you can consider it in both parts. Councillor Johnson.
I absolutely supported that on the night. I think it's really important in the past grants have come into the council, monitoring them to the nth degree. I will never give up on monies that was given to people who never used it for the purpose intended. We all know where those monies went. But in the meantime, when we're waiting for this report, I have been sending on to you any list that officers send me, saying Clive Bowen and others sending me where monies have come in, whatever the grants are, whether they're EU or wherever they've come from, so you can see while we're waiting for this protocol, because it is important that we know what money comes in, where it gets spent, and who monitors it, and if it's actually spent for the purposes it was given in the end, because we've had a lot of those in the past that weren't. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillors. I can confirm that I had an email from you saying that I would get them. I haven't yet got them, so maybe you could check with officers that...
I've sent them both.
You attached them? I think you... Oh, right.
List of monies and
Yes.
I will double check. Right, so I think that deals with item number 7. So agenda item 8, Thanet parking policy. Over to you two.
If I just do an introduction to that, we're obviously, the policy aims to provide an effective framework for parking management in Thanet. It covers both on and off street parking, but also across the sort of sectors of business, leisure and residential areas, but also recognising that those areas are not mutually exclusive, especially because we've got a very densely populated area, so a lot of these things interact. And what we try and do is create a policy, a framework that helps reconcile some of the competing demands we've got from road space in the area. And focusing on obviously trying to achieve safety on the road and supporting KCC from that point of view. Fair and consistent charging, including the sort of permit system. Fundamentally trying to support the local economy, being, I think probably the number one priority in terms of the council. Transparent, consistent and effective management and enforcement. Trying to create space for residents who've got places to park around their properties. Trying to find ways to invest in good quality car parks. And clearly providing assistance and help within assistance for people with disabilities, mobility problems and other issues. Trying to support the wider environmental agendas, particularly in relation to transport and the use of certain types of transport, and clearly trying to meet our statutory obligations in relation to managing parking. There's also a reasonable amount in the thing about procedure, but we're also trying to take forward some areas of development in the policy, including new proposals for on and off street parking schemes across Thanet to improve consistency and coverage, trying to improve provision for coach parking as a key market sector in relation to tourism, looking at car parks which are no longer serving a useful purpose and in some ways are actually perhaps detrimental to an area, and thinking about alternative uses for those. Trying to grapple with this sort of thorny issue about car parking signage in discussion with KCC and making sure that all our car parks, particularly a lot of car parking areas, are as signposted as well as possible and far away as possible. A key issue is trying to encourage more shopping visits to town centre areas to support the viability of the town centres through alternate pricing strategies, looking at digital solutions to try and improve the facilities for people, but also the enforcement and management of car parking, and also try and grapple to some extent with the issue of coaches, caravans, motorhomes and HGVs parking in residential areas and causing problems to local residents. residents as well. So, it's a document which provides a framework to move forward on a number of key areas for the council. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Yes, Councillor. Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of points for Mr. Seed. At page 34 of the paperwork, page 10 of the document, a ban on coach parking is already in place along the East Restaurant, Esplanades and Broadstairs every day from between the hours of 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Councillor Marston will probably correct me because I know she lives close by there, but I thought it was 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. 6 p.m. to 6 a.m.? Yes.
Thank you very much.
That's the first one. Yeah, there's another one actually which on page, I think it's page 50, talks about the decimation management plan. I think they mean destination management. I just had the thought of you reducing everything by 10% or something. Parking, as those of us who sit on Broadstairs Town Council and Broadstairs Council, so there's a major issue with coach parking in Broadstairs, and I don't personally think that what solutions are offered in go anywhere near trying to solve that problem. I just wondered how we can progress so that we don't have a situation again this year, next year, and the year after that we actually had this year with coaches driving around and parking in the most inappropriate places. There aren't enough coach parking spaces. 11 in Vero car park is totally insufficient, and even 20 at Joss Bay is not going to be enough to satisfy the many visitors, mainly elderly and school children who come down for the day.
I think we've clearly recognised that area. There was actually more coach parking being done. We did a lot of contacting with coach companies, but they made their own choices at times in relation to where they coach. So part of the issue is also about trying to manage the car parking, the coach parking, so that we can remove that amount of areas where that would clearly be inappropriate. And we all know that a coach parked in a mainly residential area does cause problems. Yeah, we definitely agree with that. Yeah.
I mean, I know one or two of the solutions that were offered are totally unsuitable, like St Peter's Park car park, because the coaches couldn't turn, and also Hopeville Avenue, which coaches do visit to do a village tour. Again, they can only take one maximum because a bus comes in there. So, I mean, I would like to know how the plan is to progress additional coach parking.
There are within our control a limited number of sites within the area. We did actually provide parking down at the Ramsgate Port as well. I mean, there are perhaps other issues in relation to that continuing forward. There was a problem because Vero was completely unavailable, as you say. There's a more limited number of spaces because of the development there. But there are other sites in relation to Thanet, in Margate and other sites around the area which are currently underutilised, and we would aim to do that. Part of it would be about encouraging coaches to use those spaces when currently parking on the side of the road adjacent to those areas as well. So, I mean, I think there's a wider issue about having enough total car park to deal with the peak demand in that area, because most of the time they will be completely empty. So one of the things we're trying to do is get that balance in relation to having enough parking spaces to deal with most of the demand in the area. But I think there will be times, certain times when that peak demand may exceed, and then we're looking at whether we can provide overspill areas, and the port being one of them where there is parking available down there, and was offered to coach drivers for free. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Huxley.
Thanks, Chair. Page 15 of the report, just a comment. 6.1, the parking liaison group. I've never heard of that, and none of my fellow councillors had either. I think it sounds like a good idea. It says it's an internal group. It's made up of members from the foreign departments, areas, waste and recycling, tourism, etc., etc. would it be a good idea to have a councillor or councillors on the group as well to give another perspective? I get lots of emails from residents about parking problems. We did wonder if there'd be a cabinet member, which would be Mike Harrison. I don't know if you'd be happy to. What do you think?
The aim of the group, I think, was to try and think about some of the issues that affect a significant number of departments across the council to make sure we had a consistent approach across the council. In terms of specific parking problems, we do actually have the parking service, and Mike does a fair amount of liaison with, but it was the view of the group to consider whether Mike should be involved in the parking liaison group. Mike does get involved as a portfolio holder in relation to a number of issues and develop some projects in several parts of my department as well. So.
Councillor Wilson. Thank you. Actually, I just wanted to echo what Councillor Matterface said about coach parking in Broadstairs, which I know Mr Richard is well aware of also. And just to add to what she said, there is, I think, a genuine safety aspect to this. Those of us who have watched, for instance, the language schools unloading 14 coaches on one of the Esplanades at the same time, and literally hundreds of students dashing between the coaches, between very small gaps between the coaches, cars actually driving on the pavement to avoid the blockage caused by the coaches. I think there is a genuine public safety element to this. And I'd also just like to mention the campervan situation also along the seafront in my ward, and I think in Councillor Saunders' wards as well. There have been great efforts, and we appreciate them, to stop camping literally outside people's houses for weeks on end. And some progress has been made on the seafront, but as acknowledged in here, that does push the problem up the side roads, which is, even more in your face almost. So anything that you could do to progress that and help with that would also be enormously appreciated by residents.
I think that's a key issue, because you can't control parking in one area. That applies across the whole district and the coaches, because you just push them into completely worse places. So part of it is both looking at restricting parking for certain types of vehicles which are inappropriate to motorbed, but also look at how you actually manage that parking in the adjacent areas. Trucks, you can start chasing vans and cars and coaches forever. But what we're trying to bring forward are proposals which actually are sensible and appropriate to particular areas. It's different in each area how far we might actually need to progress it. Yeah.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I think Robin Chantal-Smith might know what I'm going to say here, but something like a car park I use, and I'm sure members it's not a personal thing really, Market Street car park in Margate. I tend to use that quite a bit, but I don't have a pass. But forget me, you can go in there, you can put your money in, but the machine will only take so much money. Now over the road, we've got the Sands Hotel, and I'm fully aware that they have some parking spaces allocated to them, about 4 or 5, but there's more people stay in that hotel, we're pleased to say. If they go along about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night booking, put the money in the machine, it will only take so much money. You've got to be up about 6 o'clock in the morning to feed it more money, otherwise you get the ticket. Yeah, thank you, Bob. I've witnessed it purely because if I'm out and I think, what I'm getting at, I might have a beer, I leave my car overnight, and yes, I've had tickets, but it's something to think about. It's the tourist trade once again, a very busy car park. You can only pay a certain amount in it, and it will not take any more. And if you've got a good memory or anything at that time of night, you have to come out and put more in it. So whether parking would like to think about it. Thank you, Robin.
Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, it's a short-stay car park during the day to encourage trade into the town, but we do have a deal with the Sands Hotel for overnight parking, so thank you.
But not with others?
No, because there are no other hotels in that area at the moment. No.
Councillor Campbell.
Yes, it's about a question about the Ramsgate Port to 30 spaces. Is there a particular reason why that be pre-booked by the operator? Because we get a lot of requests at the Visitor Information Centre at Ramsgate from coach drivers. It's becoming ever more prevalent as we're actually building a tourist trade as to where they can park their coach. Now, if they have to pre-book, then these spaces aren't available to them. Is there a particular reason why they have to pre-book?
It was a particular arrangement for last year to provide those two spaces because they potentially may have competed against other uses. So we basically needed to set aside those spaces, and we knew people were actually coming. But those details were provided well and truly in advance to all the coach drivers. Some coach companies just decided to ignore that availability, especially as we were making that offer for that coach parking to be free for the users. Fair point, I think, about whether if we're going to do that in the current year, about whether we sort of simplify the arrangements in relation to people using that space if it's available. Yes.
It's the ability for our Visitor Information Centre to direct coaches to that particular appropriate place, because it's a very appropriate place to park. They could you could lay breeze blocks out so they can actually wing their way through breeze blocks, so you know exactly where they...
Thank you, Chairman. Take your page 38/39, with the consultation feedback. I congratulate the team on getting that number of replies. Recently, we had a local government's consultation in Margate and Westgate, and the replies were considerably less. In fact, very much considerably less. And it's interesting that people are more interested in car parking than they are in the local government. But what I would say is it seems we've got the local charges about right reading through this consultation. What I would say is that it's very interesting that we are still one of the cheapest car parking authorities in Kent. In fact, in the south of England, I think only parts of Hastings are cheaper than us. In general, I was in Ashford the other day, I didn't realise I had to take the bullion chest just to 3 metres. But what I would say is that well done to the team for getting that level of consultation. It shows what the public are interested in, and it's good that the council are talking to them. But I would say that perhaps we're a bit light on the tariff reviews, because I see for the last couple of years we haven't put up the charges. And what I would say is that the difficult thing with that is that at some stage in the future, charges may have to rise quite steeply, and I think it's not very good policy to keep holding charges down, because inflation goes on. It's dropped at the moment, but that's only the CPI. But if inflation starts to take off again, then we're going to be in a position where there'll be shock horror, charges go up 40%, because we're slipping further and further behind. It's far better, especially with a reduced cost to other parts of motoring, to raise the charges gradually, maybe in line with inflation.
Thank you, Councillor King.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to inquire about let me see, page 29. I think it comes under the introduction. Under the introduction, actually. It's now 5 bullet points down to the top of page 29. To provide a clear policy for enforcement. I think actually the enforcement of anything to do with this policy is crucial. And we've got an indication that we've got an average of 8 enforcement officers out at any one time between 9 and 5. I don't know whether that is enough. Personally, I don't think it is from what I've seen. So whether we have got the resources to bring in more enforcement officers, which will be crucial towards getting much of these policies, I think, made viable. So maybe Mr. Seed might like to enlighten us if there is a possible chance that there will be more enforcement officers.
I don't want to be specifics, but I think it is going to be very difficult to deliver some of these things, which could build to means on the aspirational rather than deliverable, if you haven't got the resources and the actual enforcement officers in place to do it. It doesn't matter if it's single yellow lines, double yellow lines, anti-social parking or whatever, unless you can witness it every day I do, and it goes by completely unchecked because there is no enforcement. And people come to me and ask for this, that and the other, and they're fed up with this, they're fed up with that. Yeah, you can get this put in, this check put in, this balance put in, but without the actual enforcement, it means very little. So maybe we can have some guarantees that there will be some extra resources from somewhere, because I think probably more than eight enforcement officers will be needed to deliver this. I'd like to also touch on the point I haven't seen anything in here, and the last time I brought it up at council it got batted away as a licensing issue, which I disagree with, and it's something that I think most of us see across the island, and that is on-street car sales that are normally left where it is the traffic begins to slow down so we can get a good view of the merchandise or get a better look. I've seen some sort of small about no more than about 25 yards off of a very busy road junction and the traffic lights. And also I do all of these, what I would call illegal sales anyway. I believe that there is no place for this sort of thing, and like other boroughs and other districts, and they do them, I can give you examples where they are outlawed, they are not allowed by the council anywhere in their district or borough. And I think that Thanet should be including this in their parking review. Let's not forget there are a lot of legitimate car dealers who pay business rates for premises, so why should they be doing that and other people going in another, maybe a smaller way, not be covered by the same criteria. So that's a few points there, thank you.
Would you like to comment?
Yes, picking up the last point first, it's in the main, they're parked in areas which are not enforceable, including we could introduce additional restrictions, in which case we could enforce in relation to the parking. But in general, in relation to this issue about cars what we seemed illegitimately for sale, they do get managed within the antisocial behaviour unit within the car, within the council. There is a limit clearly to how many issues they can deal with at any given time, and bear in mind they're dealing with a wide range of antisocial issues. Going back in relation to the enforcement side of things, there's clearly got to be a balance from that point of view, and in some ways I wouldn't disagree. There can always be a call for more resources. It's trying to get the right sort of balance in relation to that side of things, so we don't spend a lot of money on enforcement, but we have enough to make people think they're actually going to get caught. If there's a good chance of them getting caught if they're parking in areas. But I mean, to be fair, you can multiply that number by 10, 20 or whatever, and there will still be areas of Thanet in which we're sort of struggling to get to. We're a relatively small area, but we've got a lot of areas. We've got effectively 5 town centres to deal with on top of all the other issues, and obviously a lot of the schools. So we have a lot of mobile resources. We're also trying to cover as much as possible at the weekend and in the week on weekday nights as well, to try and pick up some of the antisocial parking that goes on in those areas. To some degree it is linked to this issue the Councillor Gregory raised about income coming through parking. Is absolutely right. We provide an exceptional deal in relation to parking in this area, but as set out in the policy, again we've got to get a balance, and it's understanding that Thanet's economic position is that's different than other parts of Kent, and we need to encourage and make sure that the economic conditions are supported as far as possible, and parking charges, the provision of car parking is a key element within that. So it does provide this sort of balance about trying to get additional income coming in to support additional enforcement resources, which again drives the turnover of car parking. So it is quite a sort of complicated relationship. At this present time, given the current finance of the council, we're not aiming to add great bits to the enforcement resources. We're not in that position at this particular time.
Mr. Seaver actually like to clarify for me what he means by non-enforceable. I don't really understand something is a word about non-enforceable. The actual parking or the selling of cars off of the main street or any streets come to that in Thanet. Why would one area of Thanet be enforceable and another part not be enforceable? And yet why is it that other authorities can make the selling of cars off of the streets of their area, district, borough? Why can they then make that illegal? Why is it that Thanet can't do the same and we have different areas that you would describe as some enforceable or some non-enforceable? Could you explain to me how you differentiate enforceable and non-enforceable? Thank you.
It was entirely in relation to enforceable parking restrictions that I was talking. In other words, if there's not a parking restriction on the side of the road, it can't be enforced by the parking team. There are other powers in relation to those types of vehicles which would be managed by other sections within the council, and they are. I'm talking particularly in the context of enforcing parking restrictions, which requires a traffic regulation order. And with that work we do on behalf of, on an agency basis on behalf of KCC. So that is very definitely in relation to there is a parking restriction which our officers can actually, parking officers can enforce.
Could Mr. Seaver tell me what his thoughts are on the actual selling of cars off of the street as opposed to the legitimate car dealers that has to pay run these businesses and pay the business rates?
I think that is okay, that's it.
I think the issue that Councillor King is raising, I'm happy to have a discussion with them around that in some more detail about where that's actually happening. I think then potentially we need to look at whether it's a planning issue or whether it's something we need to deal with through our community safety and licensing. But I need a bit more detail. Suggest that Councillor King and I perhaps have a conversation about that, and I'll see how we can take that forward and address it.
Councillor Johnson wanted to quickly.
Thank you. In fact, Councillor King does know we had this discussed at full council a couple of years ago. Phil Benstead gave us a report. We've had a number of meetings where we've discussed it further. It does come under Phil's remit. We had a neighbourhood engagement meeting in Broadstairs one night where Councillor Binks raised about Fairfield Road, I believe. Whether some roads are designated that we do have powers, there are other roads that we don't, and if there are specific roads, again, Tom, which I know you've discussed before, if you've got some specific roads again, I know that Phil would be very keen to hear from you, but you have to bring in a necessary order, and there was one, and officers from community safety were definitely working very closely with Councillor Binkson when she raised the problem.
Thank you. I think it would be interesting to know how the councils deal with it if there's a possibility to have a sort of blanket bylaw. That may be something that we can explore further. I'm going to take Councillor Campbell next.
Thank you. Just for clarity, I'm renowned for my openness and honesty and fairness. Just to ask Councillor Bayford whether Councillor Gregory's comment that there's going to be a very steep 40% increase in parking charges part of Conservative Party policies.
I think that was a rhetorical question, so let's move on to Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, Chairman. Most of the points that I was going to raise have already been covered, but I would like to congratulate officers on what I consider a very comprehensive report, which has been shown by the number of points that have been raised by other members. I am concerned with coach parking, obviously in Broadstairs. My main concern is that via road, the number of coaches designated within the new car park seems to reduce day by day almost. I mean, it started at 14, we're now down to 11, and at a meeting that we had last night in Broadstairs, 12 were mentioned, so that would be quite interesting to see once the parking spaces are marked out. So we do know that coach parking is an issue, and I'm pleased to see that in 12.2, page 50, that is obviously something that we're looking at. But I think those members who have an issue with coach parking within their wards will know that our dear old coach drivers don't actually want to pay. And a comment was made at the meeting last night that the £12.50 a day for parking of coach is too excessive. Now, in comparison with the size of a coach, which I would guess would take up 4 or 5 car parking, we pay per hour. I think £12.50 is very reasonable, but obviously the coach drivers and the operators need to be educated as to how competitive we are in this area with our coach parking. And I would reiterate the issue of enforcement, because it still happens that we do have coaches, even when the temporary arrangements that we had in Broadstairs have been well signposted, we still have coaches parking in residential areas. So I do think that we do need, once we get these car parks opened, once we get them marked correctly, I do think that we need to get enforcement officers out just to keep a review on the situation with the parking in residential areas. Thank you.
Well, thank you, members. Nobody else down to speak. So, actually, I think we've had a very useful discussion, and I hope that there's been some interesting and useful feedback. We haven't actually proposed any recommendations to be considered by Cabinet, but I'm assuming that you will just take on board the comments made by the Scrutiny. So, thank you for that, members. Agenda item 9, rejected petition, CCTV in Albion Gardens. The report is just for noting. Agenda item 10, review of overview Scrutiny and Scrutiny Panel Work Programme 2014-15. Any comments on this, member? Yes, Councillor.
I'd just like to take this opportunity to say that there has been, I think, an inquiry from, there was actually a member of the public, but he was a consultative member of the Artifacts Committee from Northern New Zealand, which I've been chairing, and progress has been very slow there, and we did actually leave it to be in the hands of officers who make a heritage lottery bid to get some money that's much needed. I think it's both for the building itself and for our side, really, the artefact side, there was to get some professional help in there, to get the archives up to date, and to get the place in order, which is badly needed, and it has actually been held up above water by the unstinted efforts of volunteers for a long time. So, you know, I believe that if you look through the comments, we have received a favourable response from the Heritage Lottery bid, which was to me. So hopefully that I have requested that the officers would set up another meeting for the artefacts working party as soon as possible, so that we can then be advised by officers how far we're getting on with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. I don't suppose there's any update on the Heritage Lottery bid that can be given.
I'm afraid I don't have anything to add beyond the comment that's already in the report, but happy to follow it up with officers to make sure that it's progressing, because I take the comment on board.
Thank you. There's a key recommendation in the report which is as follows, under 4.2, that the panel agrees to delegate to the Corporate Performance Review Working Party the authority to make recommendations on corporate performance, report directly to Cabinet, and this comes out of the sort of timetabling of, if it comes back here, you know, it's got to see all Cabinet meetings. It would seem to make sense that it goes directly to Cabinet. Members agreed? Do I have to have a proposal in a second day, technically? Councillor Campbell, Councillor Saunders. And that's agreed. Did you want to say something? Yeah. Right. Forward plan and exempt candidate report list. Any comments? Mr. Black, do you want to say anything about it? No? Well, thank you very much, members, and good night.